Most dangers in the wasteland announce themselves. Raiders, they shout before they attack. Super mutants charge without hesitation. And wild creatures react on instinct, driven by hunger or fear. Violence in Fallout is usually loud, chaotic, and immediate. Kaisar's Legion does not behave that way. When the Legion arrives, there is no screaming, no warning shot, and no dramatic entrance. There are banners on distant ridgelines, roads become empty, caravans stop hiring guards, towns can stop locking their doors at night, and people begin saying something that sounds reasonable. At least the Legion keeps the road safe. That sentence is where the danger starts, because safety is persuasive, especially in a world where survival is never guaranteed. The Legion understands this better than almost any other faction in Fallout. It does not present itself as chaos, it presents itself as order. It does not promise freedom, it promises predictability. In this video, we're going to examine Kaisar's Legion not as a villain faction or a caricature of Rome, but as a functioning system. We'll look how it began, how it expanded, and why it convinces people to accept brutality as necessity. The Legion is not terrifying because it is violent. The Wasteland is already violent. The Legion is terrifying because it makes violence feel justified. The Legion begins in the Grand Canyon, a place that shapes everything about its creation. The canyon is not just a landmark, it is geography. Sheer cliff faces, narrow crossings that funnel traffic into predictable paths, and plateaus that isolate tribes from one another. The Colorado River divides territory with a permanence that walls cannot replace. In this environment, tribes rarely fight wars of annihilation. They raid, skirmish, withdraw, and survive. In 2246, the followers of the Apocalypse sent a small research team into this region to study. Among them is Edward Sallow, a man deeply interested in the rise and collapse of civilizations. Sallow has read about history extensively. He has theories about why societies fail and why some endure longer than others. But what he lacks is experience. That changes when he is captured by the Blackfeet tribe. The Blackfeet are losing a prolonged conflict against multiple neighboring tribes. They are outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and slowly being pushed towards extinction. Sallow observes this and reaches a conclusion that will define everything that follows. The problem, in his view, is not violence. The problem is the inefficiency. Sallow does not simply hand the Blackfeet weapons. He teaches them maintenance, showing them how to clean and preserve the firearms so they don't fail after a single engagement. He introduces small unit tactics with disciplined spacing and formation. He teaches them to target the leadership rather than the fighters, to collapse any morale before the battle even begins. He introduces explosives, not as a weapon of terror, but as tools for shaping terrain and breaking the fortified positions. This is not improvisation. This is doctrine. And it works. Under Sallow's guidance, the Blackfeet do not merely survive. They dominate. They defeat rival tribes in sequence, absorbing the manpower and territory with each victory. As success compounds, respect turns into reverence. Sallow is no longer a captive. He's a leader. And then Sallow renames himself Kaisar. This is not a joke or an affection. That is declaration that history is repeating itself, and that resistance is not rebellion, but delay. Kaisar does not see himself as inventing something new. He sees himself as restoring an old truth about power. Later, he tells the courier plainly, "They were playing at war. I showed them how to fight." That sentence explains the Legion more clearly than any banner ever could. Kaisar believes that war, properly organized, can prevent chaos, that conquest can create stability, that identity must be erased for unity to exist. At this stage in his theory, it appears to be working. Tribes fall, violence decreases, order emerges, but there is a flaw embedded in the system from the very beginning. a flaw that will not reveal itself until the Hoover Dam. And one man cast into the Grand Canyon and left to die will carry that flaw with him. Later, we'll see why Joshua Graham's survival was a footnote in Legion history. It was the beginning of its collapse. Once Kaisar establishes control over the Blackfeet, the Legion does not expand outward in chaos. It expands deliberately, following a pattern that repeats itself with unsettling consistency across the American Southwest. The Legion moves tribe by tribe, always targeting the weakest first. This is not mercy, it is efficiency. Smaller tribes fall faster, providing more manpower and supplies and psychological momentum for the next conquest. Each victory makes the next one easier, not just materially, but mentally. Resistance begins to feel futile long before the Legion banners even appear. Kaisar explains this philosophy to the courier with chilling clarity when he says that tribes left alone exist in a permanent state of low-level conflict. In his view, they raid endlessly, accomplish nothing, and slowly destroy themselves through attrition. What he offers instead is finality. War that ends wars. One of the earliest examples of this method is the Twisted Hares. After their defeat, they are not simply absorbed as infantry. They are reshaped into scouts, used to locate other tribes, map routes, and identify weaknesses in enemy territory. Their role is not just military, but symbolic. They become proof that resistance leads not to extinction, but to transformation, on Kaisar's terms. As Legion scouts, the Twisted Hares move ahead of the main force, gathering intelligence and spreading fear. Along roads and ruins, the Legion leaves crucified bodies behind, placed deliberately where travelers cannot avoid seeing them. These are not random acts of cruelty, they are messages. Kaisar understands that terror is most effective when it is predictable. By the time the Legion marches in force, the psychological bad is often already over. This process repeats itself again and again. Each conquered tribe loses its name, its customs, and its eternal hierarchy. Elders are stripped of authority, children are separated from parents. What remains is not a coalition of cultures, but a single identity imposed from above: the Legion. Not every tribe submits quietly. Some resist long enough to reveal another side of the Legion's methods. The Hand Dogs. They are known for their use of trained dogs in combat. In Denver, they rely on pack tactics and intimidation, turning the environment itself into a weapon. When the Legion defeats them, it does not discard the knowledge, it simply incorporates it. The dogs remain, but the handlers change. This is a recurring pattern. The Legion does not care about tradition, it cares about utility. Anything useful is kept. Anything that fosters independent identity is destroyed. Another case is the 80s. A tribe defined their mobility, speed, and motorized warfare. Their culture's values independence and rapid movement, traits fundamentally incompatible with the Legion's emphasis on discipline and centralized control. Rather than assimilate them fully, the Legion seeks to neutralize them, forcing them into conflict with rival groups or pushing them towards eventual destruction. These examples reveal something important. The Legion does not absorb everyone equally. It absorbs what it can control and eliminates what it cannot. Cultural flexibility is not a virtue under Kaisar's rule. It is a liability. Over time, this process leaves the Legion with a population that is remarkably uniform in thought and behavior. Even if its members come from dozens of different origins, diversity only exists in scars and armor trophies, not in worldview. This is how the Legion avoids internal fracture during its rise. Identity has already been burned away before it has a chance to conflict with authority. To outsiders, the Legion looks Roman. Red tunics, Latin ranks, banners bearing the bull. This resemblance is often dismissed as an aesthetic flair or just a historical cosplay, but in reality, it is one of the Legion's most effective weapons. The average legionary does not know Roman history. He is not taught about Roman law, citizenship, or republican institutions. He does not learn about senates, courts, or civil rights. What he learns are the titles, the rituals, and punishments. Latin is used sparingly and strategically, lending authority without inviting understanding. This is intentional. Symbols are easier to control than ideas. A banner does not ask questions. A ritual does not argue. When violence is wrapped in ceremony, it feels less like brutality and more like tradition. Caesar acknowledges this pragmatism openly. When questioned about his use of Roman imagery, he does not claim historical accuracy. He claims necessity. Rome, in his mind, represents longevity, strength, and inevitability. Those associations matter more than facts. In one of his dialogues, Caesar dismisses democracy entirely, arguing that it fosters corruption, division, and weakness. The new California Republic, with its elections and civilian government, is in his eyes already collapsing under its own complexity. The Legion exists as an antithesis, simple, unified, and uncompromising. Rome, then, is not a model to be replicated. It is a story to be believed. And belief is easier to enforce than the law. By the time the Legion reaches the Colorado River, it is no longer a collection of conquered tribes. It is an apparatus. It has supply chains, intelligence networks, standardized training, and a belief system so strong that it replaces family, culture, and memory. Its soldiers do not fight for land, they fight for inevitability. And the west of the river lies something Caesar cannot ignore: the Mojave, a place where his system will be tested, not against tribes, but against a nation that still remembers being one. By 2277, Caesar's legion reaches the edge of its natural expansion. To the east lie tribes already broken, absorbed, or exterminated. To the south and north, geography limits large scale movements. But to the west lies the Mojave, and at its center stands a single structure that determines the future of the region: the Hoover Dam. The dam is not just a source of electricity, it is control over water, infrastructure, and transit. Whoever holds it controls the Colorado River, crossing, and the flow of power to New Vegas and beyond. For the Legion, the dam represents something even more important than resources. It represents legitimacy. Caesar does not see the Mojave as another tribal conquest. He sees it as a proving ground where a system must defeat a nation rather than consume fragments of one. Across the river stands the new California Republic, a bureaucratic state with laws, elections, and civilian institutions. In Caesar's worldview, this makes the NCR fragile. The Legion is meant to be the opposite. Where the NCR debates, the Legion commands. Where the NCR compromises, the Legion enforces. Where the NCR governs civilians, the Legion governs subjects. Hoover Dam is where these two philosophies will collide. The Legion's initial assault on Hoover Dam is led by Joshua Graham, known at the time as Malpius Legate. Graham is Caesar's most successful general, a man who has carried the Legion through its western expansion with ruthless efficiency. The Legion attacks in force, employing its preferred doctrine: wave upon wave of infantry advancing relentlessly, designed to exhaust and overwhelm. This approach has worked against tribes that lack coordination, long range firepower, or centralized command. The NCR does not fight like a tribe. Under the command of Chief Hanlon, NCR Rangers and 1st Recon units deliberately avoid direct engagements. Instead, holding every position, they retreat in stages, drawing Legion forces deeper into hostile territory. Legion Centurions and Decani, key command figures, are targeted first by the NCR marksmen, disrupting communication and cohesion. The decisive moment comes at Boulder City. As Legion forces pursue what appears to be a collapsing NCR defense, they enter an urban area seeded with explosives. When the Rangers withdraw, the charges are detonated. Entire Legion units are wiped out in seconds. The psychological effect is immediate and devastating. Legion soldiers trained for close combat find themselves killed at range or buried under the rubble, unable to respond. The Legion retreats, the dam holds, and for the first time in its Western campaign, the Legion has been decisively checked by an enemy that refuses to fight on its terms. Caesar's reaction to defeat is not strategic, it's ideological. Within the Legion's worldview, failure cannot be contextualized or debated. If it were, the system would fracture, responsibility must be absolute, and punishment must be visible. The Malpius Legate, as the embodiment of the Legion's will, becomes the embodiment of its failure. Graham is sentenced to death. He is covered in pitch, set on fire, and thrown into the Grand Canyon. The punishment serves multiple purposes. It removes the commander associated with defeat. It reinforces the idea that no one is above Caesar, and it transforms failure into myth. Graham's name is forbidden. Legionaries speak of him only in whispers, as the burned man. What Caesar does not know, or perhaps refuses to consider, is that Graham survives. We will return to that. For now, what matters is that Caesar believes the problem has been solved. After the defeat at Hoover Dam, the Legion does not collapse, it regroups. By 2281, it has rebuilt its forces and reestablished control across much of Arizona and New Mexico. In the Mojave, it begins a different kind of campaign, one aimed at civilians. Life under the Legion is quieter than life under the NCR frontier. The raider gangs are exterminated, chem trafficking is punished severely, the roads are patrolled, and caravans move with minimal risk. Traders like Dale Borden openly state that doing business in the Legion territory is safer and cheaper than navigating NCR lands weighed down by taxes and corruption. Even the critics of the Legion acknowledge its stability. Cass herself admits that caravan life would be easier if the Legion controlled the roads. That is not propaganda, it is reality in the wasteland. And that reality is why the Legion is dangerous. The Legion does not govern through constant violence. It governs through selective enforcement. Most subjects are left alone as long as they comply with occasional demands. They do not vote, they do not participate in governance, but they are fed, protected, and largely ignored. For many wastelanders who never had political agency to begin with, this feels like an improvement. Until it isn't. Because the Legion only asks once. Under the Legion, there is a clear distinction between legionaries, slaves, and subjects. Subjects are non-tribal civilians living in conquered territory. They are not enslaved, but they are not citizens. They have no legal protections beyond Caesar's favor. They can be relocated without any warning. Their labor and resources can be requisitioned at any time. The Legion does not negotiate. It only issues orders. If a subject complies, life continues largely unchanged. If they resist, the consequences are immediate and public. Crucifixion, execution, or enslavement serve as reminders not just to the individual, but to the community. This is how the Legion maintains control without constant patrols. Fear does not work unless fear is institutionalized. On the surface, the Legion appears to have learned from the Hoover Dam. It adapts, it waits, it undermines its enemies indirectly while maintaining internal discipline. But the loss of the dam planted the seed in Caesar, and it could not be removed. The Legion had faced an enemy it could not simply absorb, and the man Caesar tried to erase still lived. Joshua Graham's survival will matter, not because he opposes the Legion militarily, but because he represents something Caesar's system cannot tolerate. A man who remembers who he was before the Legion told him who to be. Slavery in the Legion is often described as barbaric, but that description misses what it makes effective. It is not chaotic, it is not impulsive, it is administrative. Captured individuals are first categorized as captures, a designation that strips them of personhood entirely. From there, they are evaluated for usefulness. Able bodied men may be trained as legionnaires. Others are assigned to labor, servants, or breeding stock. Those who are deemed surplus are executed. This process is tracked. The Legion keeps records and quests involving the slave ledger. The courier can see names crossed out and replaced, values assigned, and notes made about productivity and pregnancy. Pregnant slaves are documented carefully because children represent future assets. Slavery here is not merely ownership, it is inventory management. Collars play a critical role in the system. These devices are not symbolic restraints. They are functional control mechanisms designed to enforce compliance and prevent escape. The collar removes the need for constant supervision. A slave does not need to be watched if punishment can be delivered remotely or instantaneously. This is why slavery persists so effectively under the Legion. It does not rely on sadism, it relies on systems. Once suffering is routinized, it stops being questioned. It becomes procedure, and procedures are always easier to justify than cruelty. To sustain a system this brutal, the Legion requires more than fear, it requires belief. Caesar provides it by declaring himself the son of Mars. This is not framed as a metaphor. Legionaries are taught that Mars ordered cleansing fire of the Great War, reducing humanity to its lowest point so that it can be rebuilt correctly. Caesar's conquests are therefore not ambition, they are a divine mandate. Religion becomes infrastructure. Children are removed from their parents, raised by priestesses, and indoctrinated from birth into the Legion doctrine. Education is tightly controlled. History is simplified. Alternatives are erased. The appearance of divinity is maintained through enforced ignorance. Caesar fears the educated more than the armed. He orders members of the followers of the apocalypse killed on sight or delivered for interrogation. Knowledge is one threat his system cannot absorb because it introduces comparison. A person who learns that other systems exist may begin to ask why this one is necessary. The Legion cannot allow that question to be asked. Legate Lanius is often mistaken for Caesar's successor. He is not. He is Caesar's proof of concept. Lanius originates from a conquered tribe, taken young and reshaped completely by the Legion. His past is erased. His identity is rebuilt around obedience, strength, and inevitability. Where Caesar speaks in ideology, Lanius speaks in outcomes. He does not justify the Legion. He fully embodies it. When Lanius speaks to the courier, he does not argue philosophy. He simply promises annihilation. In his worldview, mercy is weakness, compromise leads to decay, and resistance is only temporary. Caesar needs Lanius because systems like the Legion eventually require enforcers who no longer question the purpose. Lanius is what happens when erasure is complete, but this creates a fatal flaw. Lanius can conquer, but he cannot govern. Earlier, we left Joshua Graham burning in the Grand Canyon. Caesar believed that erasing Graham would erase failure, that myth would replace memory, that obedience would reassert itself. But Graham survives, and survival changes him. In Zion, Graham becomes something the Legion cannot comprehend. A man who remembers who he was before Caesar told him who to be. His faith is no longer enforced. His identity is no longer erased. He is not loyal because he is afraid. He chooses. This is why Graham is dangerous to the Legion. Not because he fights it, but because he disproves it. He proves that identity can survive erasure, that belief can exist without coercion, that people are capable of choosing restraint instead of domination. Kaiser's system cannot tolerate that proof, because if one man can survive being erased, then the system is not inevitable. Kaiser's Legion is stable only as long as Kaiser lives. He does not build institutions. He does not train successors. He does not loud shared authority. When Kaiser dies, the Legion fractures. Rival claimants emerge. Civil war breaks out. Loyalty shifts from ideology to personality. The same mechanisms that enforce unity now accelerate the collapse. This is the final irony of the Legion. It sacrifices everything to prevent fragmentation, and in doing so, it guarantees it. Kaiser's Legion is not terrifying because it is violent. The wasteland is already violent. It is terrifying because it offers a solution: safety in exchange for silence, order in exchange for identity, peace in exchange for choice. And in a broken world, that offer is tempting. The Legion does not conquer you by killing you, it conquers you by convincing you that this is the only way things could ever be. And this is why the most dangerous lie in Fallout ever tells is the Legion. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe to the Hyperfix Hub. Check out my other Fallout videos.